Hi, my name is Jeff Petracca, and I'm the curator of entomology at the Long Island Aquarium's Butterfly exhibit, and I'm also an educator at the DNA Learning Center. Now, it's spring, and today is Earth Day, and I thought, what a great opportunity to start talking about butterfly gardening. Now, it's still a little bit early for butterflies to become active because it's still kind of cold. But now is the time that you want to start planning your butterfly garden for the season. This is a great opportunity and experience with your children or with families to plant a butterfly garden and see what types of butterflies you can attract to your yard. Now, butterflies don't just like any plants. So a good butterfly garden, you need to have nectar plants. Those are plants that produce flowers that adult butterflies like to feed from. And you want to have plants that bloom from the very first moment in spring all the way on up to the end of the fall. And so this plant right here is one of my favorite plants that's in bloom right now. This is a viburnum, and that's an excellent nectar plant for some butterflies that are active early in the spring. But you also want to have plants that the adult butterflies will lay eggs on. Those plants are called host plants. And every butterfly has its own specific host plant that it likes to lay eggs on. I have a lot of host plants in my garden. I've been raising butterflies for 20 years now. And one of my favorite butterflies to raise is the question mark butterfly. And right down here, this is one of the first host plants that sprouted this season. This is a hops vine. Hops you may be familiar with from beer production. They use it in beer production. But the question mark butterfly, which is a little orange and black butterfly that looks almost like a dead leaf, she likes to lay eggs on this particular type of vine. So ideally in a good butterfly garden, you want a mix of both nectar plants and host plants. I have a couple of other tips for you as well, so let's check some of those out. Okay, so here are my tips for butterfly gardening. Number one, plant your garden in a well-lit, sunny area with some areas of shade, just to give butterflies some relief on a hot summer day. Also, don't use any pesticides whatsoever, and try to encourage your neighbors to do the same. Just because even if you're not applying pesticides to hurt butterflies, sometimes those chemicals can linger in your garden and affect non-target species such as butterflies and other pollinating insects. Also, and perhaps most importantly, you want to plant the right set of flowering plants to serve as nectar producing food sources for adult butterflies. And there's some caveats to this. You want to avoid cultivars as much as possible, just because sometimes cultivars are bred for flower size or flower color, and that comes at a sacrificing nectar production, meaning that you'll have a big showy flower, but there won't be any nectar rewards for butterflies, so they're not going to really be attracted to them. Try to go for as close to wild type plants as possible. Also, you want to make sure that you have something in bloom all season long. So from the very first parts of spring all the way on through the end of fall. And remember that these nectar plants are meant to attract adult butterflies to your yard for food. So some of my favorite spring bloomers, for example, would be like what I showed you earlier. So viburnum, that's a great one. Golden chain tree is another amazing, beautiful tree that will draw butterflies. Dianthus is a little grassy perennial. And ligustrum or privet is a common hedge that's typically used as a sort of a hedge or shrub in gardens, but it's often trimmed in the spring. So what that winds up doing is eliminating the possibility of them sending up flower spikes. And if you let it do so, privet will send out these beautiful white flower spikes that are very fragrant and will attract butterflies and other pollinating insects. Those are my favorite spring bloomers. So summer bloomers, we have things like Virginia sweetspire up here. That's an excellent, beautiful plant for both butterflies as well as bees. Stokes aster is another good one. Echinacea is great, purple coneflower that is. And then over here we have false sunflower, Heliopsis. And interestingly, so what I was saying before, not all nectar plants are created equal. So believe it or not, if you were to grow regular sunflowers that look from which you get like sunflower seeds from, those are not really attractive to butterflies at all. Bees might like them, but for whatever reason, the nectar isn't really attractive to butterflies. So that's why I say you really have to plan out your garden specifically. Then onto the fall bloomers. So some of my favorites would include things like Eutrochium or Joe Pye weed, goldenrod, solidago, and both of these are common weeds that you might want to pull out of your garden. But remember, sometimes what is a weed to us may not be a weed to other organisms. And these plants are critical to fall butterflies, especially like monarchs, for instance, that are making their way down to their migratory grounds in Mexico. So in the Northeast and the Eastern United States, both Joe Pye weed and goldenrod are critical food sources for monarch butterflies to fuel up on their journey. New England aster is another good one, and sedum. It's like a little fleshy, almost like succulent type plant. But those are excellent nectar plants as well. And that brings me to my next point. So the other thing is you want to maintain the right set of host plants, or grow the right set of host plants in your garden as well. And now host plants, remember, are plants that are critical for adult butterflies to lay eggs on. Now, every butterfly species has its own particular plant or group of plants that it likes to lay eggs on. And these are going to encourage those butterflies to stick around in your yard once they find their way there. And oftentimes, remember, we might consider some of these host plants weeds, and we might pull them out. But remember, they're absolutely critical habitat for adult butterflies. So, for example, milkweed is the host plant of the monarch butterfly. And here we have the monarch butterfly over here. And here are several different types of milkweed that we might find in the northeastern United States. And notice that, I mean, it's in the name, they're called weeds, because often we don't want them growing in our yard because they're very invasive, and they kind of get everywhere, and they're sometimes kind of gross to look at. So people tend to pull them out. But if you do, you're eliminating valuable habitat for the monarch butterfly. An alternative might be butterfly weed, for example, which is sold in garden centers and nurseries as a butterfly attractive plant. And actually, this, as well as all the rest of these milkweeds, serve two purposes. The flowers are pretty attractive to adult butterflies, but the leaves are excellent sources of food for monarch butterfly caterpillars. So you want to research the types of butterflies that you have in your area to see what type of host plants you might want to include in your yard, or what type of weeds you might want to leave in your yard. Because if you're trying to set up a good butterfly garden, you may inadvertently be going through your yard pulling out weeds that butterflies in your area need to lay their eggs on. So you always want to research and learn about what butterflies you have in your area, and which ones you want to draw to your yard. And if you have any questions about that, you could always email me at petracca@cshl.edu, or my aquarium email, jpetracca@amwnewyork or NY rather .com, and I can send you a list of nectar plants and good butterfly gardening plants. So there you have it, some great tips on butterfly gardening. Don't forget to email me if you have any questions on specific plants or how to draw specific butterflies to your garden. And also, don't forget, our Earth is a very special place. There are many environments, each with their own specific blends of organisms, and each one of those organisms has a function in those environments. So yes, everything from a simple ant or a butterfly, right on up to a gigantic tree, or even the most insignificant weed that we might want to rip out of our garden because we don't want it growing there. All of them have a place. Remember, we saw how butterflies like to lay eggs on plants that we would consider weeds. So I would always encourage you to expand your knowledge of the natural world and learn how to conserve our Earth and preserve all of these environments for both us and future generations to enjoy. So from all of us here at the DNA Learning Center and the Long Island Aquarium, have a happy Earth Day and happy butterfly gardening.